first of all, I just want to thank both Syndey and Monica for being here. And as I was, kind of figuring out, well, what's the best way to introduce you both and to set the scene for what we're going to talk about today, I thought, well, and I said just a little bit of context. So applied frameworks, we just basically exist to help companies create better products faster. So we help companies use frameworks for lean portfolio management, product management, for scaling agile inside IT and outside IT. Basically, our philosophy is that frameworks help teams get better faster. So that means things like budgets can be agile, stakeholders can be aligned, you can build the right product at the right time. And all of this stuff is really important, but I think it's only half of the coin. At the end of the day, all these teams are like comprised of people, right? It's like individuals are on a team. And people want to get up in the morning and look forward to what they're working on. And they want to work on stuff that's hard, but they need confidence that it's worthwhile. There's a chance of success at the end, right? So I think people, adults, get excited about working on hard problems and solving hard problems and tackling things that are challenging. So I think what's interesting here is that in Agile, like the focus is so often on the team, right? Whether it's a portfolio team or a product team or a development team or a marketing team. But it's, I think, important to take that step back and say, hey, teams are actually collections of individuals who all just want to love what they do, and they all want to contribute, and they all want to solve hard problems. And it's in this context that I met both Monica and Syndey. So that's a very long preamble to thank you both for being here. Syndey, like in her quest to get up in the morning and love what she does, we met in the context of her being a graduate of our advanced Scrum Master program. And so I think one of the dimensions, or one of the ways, Syndey, that you approach this loving what you do is you never stop learning, right? Like, so you're just always kind of gaining skills. And there's this element of Monica in there too, because Monica has this like amazing growth mindset that I think you'll all get a taste of as we talk today. So both of them are with a company called American Ag Credit. And I'm sure you'll tell a little bit more about yourselves. I'm going to stop talking now and let you guys kind of introduce yourselves and also get into your story, which I think is really the reason that we're here. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Sure, thank you. Yes, I'm Syndey Kimball. I'm an advanced certified Scrum Master. I've been with American Ag Credit for about 23 years in a variety of roles. And right now I'm a Scrum Master working in our IT department. It's more known now as customer enablement, but I work on a Scrum team. We have about 14, 15 Scrum teams for development. And I've been, as Laura said, I've been a student of applied frameworks for the professional Scrum Master certification, close to being graduated, not quite, but one of the modules I was working on was the challenge was for a mentoring challenge. And so when I opened that up, I thought, oh, well, that ought to be kind of interesting. I've never done that before. So as I was reading the material, I realized, well, heck, I'm going through a situation right now with Monica. So when I talked to her and asked her if I could submit, an experience report on it, she was very gracious and said, absolutely. So I said, well, I'll change your name and everything. And when I submit it for, the course, it'll just get filed away somewhere, and don't worry about it. No one will know about it. So, Laura, you can probably
protecting the innocent didn't last too long, did it? And here is Monica on a very public webinar.
I know, right? Well, and we do have a really nice story to tell. And the first thing I'm going to tell listeners is I do not have experience in mentoring. It just happened to work that way. And I also got guidance from the course and also guidance from supervisors who had the same goal I did in helping Monica, through just a really tough time. So that's my intro, and that's kind of how we got here today.
Monica, anything you want to add about that or about yourself before we get into this?
No, it's an honor to be here today. I work beside Sid on the same Scrum team. I'm a business analyst and she's the Scrum Master. We've been working together since January. I've been in various IT roles for over 15 years. So I think what the audience will learn today is anyone can be in a mentoring relationship, not necessarily someone who's new to Agile or IT, right? Because we're always learning. There's always something to learn, always ways to improve. And yeah, this has been a great experience. It kind of happened organically, and Sid and I will get into that in a little bit. So thanks for having me today.
Great. Well, you know, it's as I was trying to figure out, well, how do we get into the story? And I was thinking about this role of Scrum Master and, you know, the focus on the team or the organization. You know, it really has all these words that I haven't seen mentoring show up anywhere, right? Like maybe there is somewhere, but I'm looking at, you know, Scrum Alliance and trying to figure out, is there a competency around mentoring? And there's a lot of words that are similar, right? But mentoring isn't really one of them. And again, the focus tends to be like on the team, although, you know, there is this support of in service of the product owner, but that's not even, you know, it still didn't sound like a personal relationship. It was like in service of the role of the product owner, right? So there's this like, you know, okay, what about the people, right? And so I don't know if you have any other kind of comments about what the role of the Scrum Master is and how much time you spend on team versus product owner role versus supporting the organization. And I'm curious, as we go through this, have you started thinking about the individuals differently now that we've been thinking more about mentoring and what's been going on, you know, with Monica specifically?
Yeah. Matter of fact, a lot of more thoughts on mentoring. And yes, our organization is really big on sharing Agile values throughout the organization. So all the departments in our company is trying to approach Agile and, you know, how to move, you know, assignments along faster, more iteratively, and just thinking more along, you know, how can we be constantly improving? You know, we need to carve out space for thinking about, you know, has this been working? Can we do it better? What do we want to change? So you're right that, you know, it really helps when the organization is behind it. But in my advanced Scrum Master course, they did recommend doing one-on-one meetings with each team member. And I hesitated to do that because I know everybody's in meetings and everybody's meeting with their supervisor. So I don't know, you know, if that was really a value, but I did start it. And I think that did help because you do have a chance, even if it's just a couple of minutes to meet with each individual one-on-one. And because we'd been doing that already, Monica and I had already had a chance to form a relationship. So we had already built up a relationship of trust. You know, trust you have to work on every day, every meeting, every encounter. You're always either earning it or losing it, right? So one of the things that I think helped, which, you know, we have, I think, in a slide later on, is you have to have a comfortable working environment, which is a Scrum Master responsibility. Make sure the team has a comfortable working environment so they can be bringing up sensitive issues and whatnot, you know, and talking with each other. But I really think that did help with getting our mentoring relationship off on the right track.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I read an article yesterday, and I really should have just pegged it so I could reference what it was, but it was about this, in some cases, this declining productivity that people are having. And it's this like the type of meetings, right? They tend to be one type, and it's the Zoom kind of meeting. And so you know, with more than one person, right? It's usually a group of people who are doing that. So I do think there's something about paying attention to the kind of individual relationships that you have with people you work with, especially when you can't just hang out with them anymore. So I appreciate that comment about finding time. All of us, whether you're a Scrum Master or whatever role you happen to play, it's like finding time to just connect, even if it's 5 minutes, with one person rather than a group of people.
Yeah. I think one more thing that what we do during Zoom calls is we pretty much insist that everybody has their video on. Which with some people is harder, you know, especially if it's like a meeting that kind of encroaches on lunch hour, you're kind of sitting there drinking, or like you say, stuff's going on behind you, especially now that we're at home. But I think that makes a huge difference. If we could see each other, even if it's just a little box, you know, at least we can see each other react.
Yeah, body language and facial expressions go a long way. We're all human at the end of the day, and these are strange times. So I think having our team mandatory to have our cameras on, it does go a long way. It just makes it a little more personable.
You know, and I hate to admit it, but I have actually eaten in a meeting in the office And, you know, behind us, stuff happens in the office all the time that may
Right.
be weird too. So it's just getting used to the fact that people have a bit of a visibility into my home, which is maybe, I'm used to
Yeah.
it now, but you know, it's a little weird in the beginning.
Yeah.
All right. So mentoring, talk to me about like the mind shift you had around that and what is it? And then we can talk about the story specifically.
Yeah, I really thought about this in preparation for this webinar. It's like, wait, because I'm sure people are out there thinking, well, yeah, I want to be a Scrum Master, but I don't know about mentoring. You know, that's not really what I had thought about as a career. And what I came up with is, you know, as Scrum Masters, we're coaches, right? We're agile coaches, you know, we're guides. We assist the team, servant leaders. When it becomes more of a one-on-one situation, similar to the story that we're going to tell in a minute with Monica, mentoring really is more one-on-one. Kind of the allegory I use is, you know, a basketball coach coaches the team, right? But he may work on the side with one player to help them perfect their free throws, right? So it's kind of that same allegory. Now, again, you know, people are going to sit there and think, well, yeah, you know, during this day, you know, shelter in place, I'm sure there was a lot of team level mentoring, you know, hey guys, we can do this all together. You know, our team is experiencing some changes in team membership. And so that's kind of difficult. So that we're kind of going through that, you know, forming and storming stage. So, you know, kind of mentoring there. But really, when you talk about mentoring as it's meant to, you have that goal of that individual improvement, that's really on the individual level. So that's why I thought of this slide as kind of explains the difference for Scrum Masters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the other questions I have is about mentoring is, and this is a question for you guys really, I'm thinking about maybe coaching is a little bit more prescriptive, right? Like I understand Scrum and I'm going to help you apply Scrum and I have suggestions about how the team can help and right, we're going to learn this together. Whereas mentoring might be more of creating a space to help have the person kind of figure it out on their own too. So you're not telling Monica how to solve her problem, you're enabling her to solve her own problem. And
True.
right.
Yes.
So there might also be an element of like how much
Yeah.
agency and how much of an expert are you perceived? Like you said it when we were originally talking, I don't know how to mentor anyone. I'm not an expert. What do I know about being a business analyst? I'm a Scrum Master, right? Like how can I help? Right.
Yeah.
So maybe this is kind of a good transition into, hey, Monica, why don't you like tell us about, you know, what you were struggling with and then how, Syndey, how did you end up realizing that, well, okay, I don't know how to be a business analyst, but maybe I can still help.
Sure. Yeah, so like I said earlier, just joined the team, SID's team back in January, and it was a struggle. I've been a business analyst before, but something about the coming into a team, there were a lot of personnel changes, a monstrous backlog that I felt accountable for organizing completely on my own. We had 2 BAs originally when I started, and then shortly after I had joined the team, the other BA had left. So out of nowhere, I was the lead BA for a team who I was still fairly new to. Our product is something I was still trying to wrap my head around. I was just very overwhelmed. And on top of all this, we're going through a global pandemic, and I don't have that human support that we tend to have when we're in the office. I realize that now, that I just felt like I was a face on a screen and kind of just dealing with this alone. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. These are really interesting times in the workplace and personal life. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I think I've realized that now more than ever through this mentoring exercise, because I didn't really ask for help. Just Syd had, with her great instincts, could tell, yeah, I think I'm going to reach out to Monica and see how she's doing. And I'm so glad that she did, because I was going into catastrophic thinking. Am I going to be kicked off this team? Am I going to lose my job? And now thinking about this months later, no, of course I was going to be kicked off the team. I was the only BA, right? But when we have a lot of things going on and have that feeling that we're alone, more or less, that can lead to catastrophic thinking. So I was in a really tough spot, and just one day Sid reached out to me, whether it was Zoom chat or in one of our one-on-ones, saying, hey, how are you doing? And that just immediately, huge weight off my shoulders. It had been a while since a team member asked, how are you doing? Like, you know what? I'm not doing that great. So that organically just evolved into a mentoring relationship. This wasn't a formal exercise really of, hey, Monica, is it all right if I mentor you? No, it wasn't like that at all. It just started with that human conversation, building a relationship. Like Sid said, we already had a relationship based on trust. And that opened the door to me asking her questions. All right, these are my challenges. How do you think I should do this? And it evolved into an even stronger relationship.
Yeah.
You know, I'm looking at this, like your triggers of like, okay, the backlog was a mess. I'm the only business analyst here. I feel overly responsible or personally responsible for everything. There's just too much. I can't make sense of it. Oh my God, I'm going to get fired. I'm positive that we have all gone through moments like that, and having a disaster of a backlog, half the people on this call might say either we have that or we had it, or it might happen to me again. Right. So having somebody say, how are you doing? I'm sure we all could do that once in a while, a little bit more often.
Definitely.
Right.
All right. So how, this is the situation, right? And you asked the magic question. Sid, how did you feel prepared to even step into this role? Like, talk to me about, you know, what did you leverage in order to make this effective? And then how did it play out for both of you?
Well, how the Scrum Master role helped me was basically having the mindset of a servant leader. I'm here to serve, and I'm here to serve the team perform better. But that really means that everybody on the team needs to be performing well, right? And they need to be getting along well, and they all need to have, you know, their common goals. So having the comfortable team working environment, I felt that I had already done, you know, at least working on that, and we'd already talked about it as a team. Hey, this is, you know, this is our comfortable team environment, you know, and some conversations are confidential, and whatever we say here stays here unless we agree that we can share it outside the team. So we'd already kind of had that groundwork. So a lot of the agile practices, like you say, I knew Scrum, I knew all the roles that were supposed to be there. But with Monica, what I did was I thought about, okay, I can approach this in two different ways. I can either reach out to her and help her figure out how to kind of get back on track, kind of right size. I could also have approached it, give her a call and say, hey, Monica, you got to get your shit together because you're upsetting the team and we got stuff to do, right? Click. And you can imagine that that would have not solved the situation, especially after hearing the struggles that Monica was going through. So even though I didn't know her role, I could sit there and I can say, hey, Monica, tell me what your fears are. What are you afraid of? And every time she brought something up, I said, okay, well, let's talk about that. It's like, I've got too much on my plate. You know, and I think at the time she had like 30, 40 backlog items assigned to her, and she was overwhelmed because she felt like she had to do them all together. So basically it was like, well, you can't work on 30 things at a time, right? How many things, I mean, I know that one thing at a time, you may be reaching out to a stakeholder, waiting for them to hear back from you, but let's look at this logically and let's see how we can right size your plate, right? So we talked about that. And then she talked about, well, you guys, I'm sure you guys think I'm doing a horrible job and you're going to kick me off the team. It's like, no, we don't think that at all. And let's talk about roles. Let's talk about responsibilities. What are you most responsible for? What are you accountable for? There's a whole team that's working on the same goals. We've got a product owner who's also responsible. We do have another BA that, as our BA, Monica mentioned, she shifted, but we do get a new one. So let's bring that person up to speed to help share the plate. We've also got developers who have shown interest in trying to figure out what the requirements are, especially the tech requirements on the product backlog items. Let's get them involved. So every time she brought up a fear, we were able to talk through it and figure out a solution for it. And so I think having that mindset on let's solution instead of hitting somebody over the head, you know, I think that really helped. And
So,
the facilitation skills, retrospective games, that we play, other things like that come into bear there too.
so Monica, one of the questions that just came up was, well, what's the role of the Scrum Master in explaining what a business analyst does with the team? Well, I mean, part of it might be that you had to unpack that, right? Like, what's my role and what am I responsible for? And then that goes into this question then, where did you find that you both had to kind of bring this into a team discussion about, hey, maybe there is a little bit lack of role clarity around what you're responsible for and then what you're able to contribute to? And, and what is that relationship between product owner and business analyst? And so it's sort of like, hey, the tip of the iceberg might be, Monica, if you're not even sure what your role is, no one else must know either, right? So talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that was a struggle at first. I've played roles as Scrum Master and product owner in previous Scrum teams. And because of this massive backlog and frequent personnel changes, without anyone on the team really asking me, I just took it upon myself to own the backlog. It's because it was such a disaster. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get it organized. I'm going to always be there to help the team when they have questions, whether they're developers or a product owner or a new business analyst. So even though I knew what my role was as a business analyst, I put that aside, I think, because I was just so overwhelmed with the fear of the team failing as a whole, that I just took that responsibility all on myself. And that's when it really just started going to shambles. We can't do everything on our own. That's why we have team members, right? So one of the first questions Sid asked me was, well, what's your greatest fear? What is your nightmare scenario? And I had so many nightmares at that point, but I think my nightmare was having to hold the role of product owner and business analyst in order for this team to succeed, in order for this backlog to get into a healthy state. And said, no, that's not your responsibility, right? We're a team. We need to define roles and responsibilities so we can all help each other. So yeah, there were some crucial conversations at the team level of, all right, guys, I think I had 45 to 50 PBIs assigned to me at one time, and like, all right, this has got to stop. All right. So we had team discussions on, okay, we had a new product owner. What is he responsible for? Yes, the BA is supposed to be assisting product owner when necessary, but where's that line, right? Where do those division of responsibilities end? So yeah, it's a role definition for every team, and even frequently is a conversation I think the team needs to have at a team level and individual level.
Yeah, and my guess is this is even more more important than ever, that the Scrum Master starts to recognize these things, because one of the comments is, hey, this fear, this crisis mode that you were in is probably exacerbated by everyone being alone and working from home. Exactly. Right? So it's like this, the Scrum Master is the one that has that ability to kind of recognize that we haven't talked about roles and responsibilities. Like every once in a while, you kind of need to go back to that and just reaffirm and ask the question and make sure that there's alignment around who's supporting and who's responsible, and how can we as a team do that better. So it's a topic for maybe another webinar, but it's like, hey, the retrospective question doesn't always have to be what's working and what's not, right? You can spend time at a retrospective talking about, hey, are we still in alignment about what our roles are? Do we all, do I know what you're responsible for, and do you know what I'm responsible for? And if that's a thumbs up from everybody, that's a good thing.
And, kudos to the team, because when these conversations happened, everybody was on board. The product owner was on board. He said, oh, no problem. We can work together on a WIP limit, work in process limit. Like I mentioned, the developers have stepped up, and they're actually having really good conversations with stakeholders to figure out some of the technical requirements. So Monica inadvertently brought a lot of positivity to the team because of those conversations that we were able to have and kind of share the wealth, so to speak. We all have our assigned role on the team, but that doesn't mean you can't be doing other people's tasks, so to speak, if it's a betterment for the entire team and if it's something you enjoy doing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the Monica, your crisis helped the team understand probably the customer better, the vision and mission of the product better. There's like probably a little bit more passion on, hey, we know what we're building and why, because I had to like talk to stakeholders and figure that out. So yeah, I would imagine there's a lot of upside that came from that.
Yeah, definitely. Our, like Sid said, our developers stepped up. They're like, oh, well, part of the technical refinement piece, that shouldn't be on you. I'll step in. So everyone was just so eager. It was the most positive reaction I could have ever imagined. So I just wish I had brought it up sooner. But moving forward, we can't be afraid to ask for help, because if we don't, we'll fail.
So, you know, I know we talked about some of this stuff already. It's like, yeah, I know, you know, you guys, I introduced you, Monica, as having, you know, of all the people I've met, you know, just recognizing your growth mindset, it was like immediately apparent, like you just have that, right? So there's definitely things that you both had going for you, including the trust and things like that. But I think what people are probably curious about is, okay, well, what did you do? Like, how did you approach this? What did you talk about in your phone calls? And how did you, you know, how long did it take?
How long did it take? Well, it actually, from crisis mode to not crisis mode, it was really quick. It was a huge relief. Just like I said, the moment that Sid said, "Hey, are you doing okay?" I'm not in this alone, right? So in terms of getting out of the crisis mode, that helped really quickly. But role clarification and goal alignment here is just so key. And like you said earlier, it really brought the team together. I was just so pleased with how everyone on the team was willing to help. And my questions that I had that I was keeping to myself and will eventually asked Sid, I wasn't the only person with these questions, right? There were some developers who didn't understand their responsibilities and gray areas of gathering business requirements versus technical requirements. Same with our product owner. He was a fairly new team member as well, not realizing that I had been doing some of his responsibilities because I just took that upon myself, right? So I think role clarification, it took a few working sessions with Sid and I would say one-on-one, and immediately after the first meeting in a team setting, I think I saw improvement. Sid, what do you think?
I think so. I think the conversation was a good one to have, because the whole team knew that you were going through a rough time, and everybody wanted to help you. So I think seeing you come with, you know, some sort of a solution like, hey, I just need clarification on my role, which means clarification for everybody else's role here, I think was just a really good, wholesome conversation for the team, for their development as a team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the other thing that you said earlier on in the conversation is, you know, just how much of a relief you felt just having somebody ask you about, well, what are your worst fears? Like, what are you really afraid of? And so, you know, as I thinking about, well, what are a couple of the big takeaways that people can have from either being here today or listening to this session in the recording? And it's like, okay, part of what Applied Frameworks is all about is collecting, curating, using, tailoring frameworks, right, for specific things. And most of the time they're focused on teams or portfolios or product management issues, but we have some that we use that are really ideal for like the individual too. So just wanted to bring these a couple, there's probably 10 of them I could have picked from, but these two I thought were kind of impactful. And one of them is an innovation game called My Worst Nightmare. This is actually a picture. I realize now I picked a product owner picture, which is kind of funny. It's sort of related to what you were struggling with, but too many choices, too much stuff. And they're, you know, and if you would have had them talk about this, they probably would have talked about, oh my gosh, I might get fired, right? Or I'm incompetent, I don't know how to do this. So the way this particular framework works is, and Sid and Monica did this not intentionally. They didn't say, ooh, let's use this innovation game called My Worst Nightmare. But that question of like, what are you afraid of? Mm-hmm. Right? So what, as a coach or a mentor or a Scrum Master or a friend, right? Like what you can do is ask somebody to just draw it out. You don't have to be an artist, but what is it that what's the worst thing that can happen? And let's make it visible and talk about it. And just, I think from what I hear you two talk about is just being able to both express it, Monica, and then for Sid to be able to understand it and go, oh, I hear you. Like, let's work on that together was 50% of the problem, right? Would you say that's probably true?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like I said, we're going through really strange times now more than ever. And the feeling of loneliness, or that we're the lack of a team environment and support, I hope people can relate to that. So when Sid said, yeah, what's the worst that could happen? And just starting that open dialogue based on trust, everything was so quickly falling into place.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as I mean, I've used this framework many times myself, and one of the questions I will sometimes add in there is, well, what's the baggage you're bringing to this worst nightmare that is just your reality that you deal with, right? I mean, a lot of us have kids who are struggling with remote distance learning right now. Well, that just makes it even harder about thinking about, oh my God, I'm going to get fired, right? Because you've got a kid in tears at the kitchen table trying to figure out their homework at the same time, right? Or your dog is super sick, or your kid is struggling in college, or your mom is really ill, or, we all have this like reality of life. And when everything's going great, that's hard enough to deal with. But if everything is not, right? So if there's this level of trust, you can start to ask those questions too. It's like, well, what's going on that even makes this harder to deal with? And again, just sometimes having it out in the open makes it possible to just cope with it, right? So this is a great framework for helping somebody, in a situation where there is some trust to just get it out in the open. And then you can kind of move on to the second phase, which I heard you both talk about. And this Masa Might, as a friend of mine, is a great agilist generally. And he kind of developed this variation of a canvas, which is kind of getting at, well, what's holding me back? What are the things that I need to do better? Why, what could I do that I haven't tried yet? And it's like this way of like, how, as an individual in this role, what are some of the things that I could do to start to improve my future, right? Or to improve my role. And again, it's just kind of a thinking canvas. It's not necessarily meant for 20 people to participate in, although I suppose you could share it with those, but it's just a way of start to saying, okay, well, if this is my nightmare, what are some of the things I can do that are maybe proactive or feel actionable?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, and then and we talked about this too, but I think you guys did this, right? You were talking about, all right, well, what are some of the possibilities? What are some of the things that I could do? And what are some of the things the team could help me with? And then what do we want to try? So this is a variation of sort of like a personal Kanban. And Sid, I know you asked some of these questions in your mentoring sessions. Right. So you could also use something like this to just make it a little bit more visible between you, but it's like, okay, well, let's start to organize what we want to do. And then when we're going to decide to try something, let's apply WIP limits here too. I think we're going to try 1 or 2 things. We're not going to try 10 things. Right. And we're just going to take a very careful approach. So if you guys could talk a little bit about how did you approach the take action part of your conversations?
Sure. Well, I can Sid, I'd love you to speak about the work in progress, because that was really your opportunity to come to the team. And she didn't even approach this with, hey guys, Monica has 40 items assigned to me in the backlog. No one else has that much, right? She presented this concept of work in progress, so anyone at any given time can know exactly what they're supposed to focus on. We're now in 2-week sprints, right? So anyone on the team can go to the Kanban board and see what we're working on. If someone is done with their work for the sprint, okay, great. What does someone need help with? And Sid, I don't want to steal your thunder. I'll let you.
No, that's fine, because I knew it was an issue for you, especially because, and to be fair with our product owner, our previous product owner, well, it wasn't even our previous product owner. When our Scrum team started a couple years ago, the thought was, if anything you could think of for that product, throw on the backlog, just get it on there. We'll work it out later. So our backlog had like 400 items that literally had a title and no description, no acceptance criteria, not even a requester. So it does take quite a bit of analysis on some of the older items in the backlog. The newer stuff we've got down pat, but so at that time, what they had done is kind of divvied it up with the VAs and the product owner to kind of divide and conquer. And in some cases, some personalities may be fine. You know, I've got 40 things on the backlog. I'm just going to assume that my product owner has them prioritized, and I'll just pick them off one at a time and work on them. No worries. At least I know what my plan is for the next couple months. With Monica, it obviously wasn't working because she was feeling responsible for the whole soup to nuts. So I said, well, give me an idea, you know, of what you'd feel comfortable with, knowing that, you know, you're not actually working on everything at one time. And so I think we came up with like 5 to 7, knowing that some of them you wouldn't be getting to yet. And our product owner's been very good about sticking to that limit. So if he wants to pull something up in priority, he knows to unassign her from something else. So for her, that's working very well. And then kind of in the meantime on that, with our daily scrums, instead of going down our Scrum backlog by list view, we found a different view in our tool that we can actually do a Kanban board on. So we actually, during, you know, the daily scrums, we're pulling stuff across the board. So we're kind of doing a Kanban-esque report. And that, I think, does help visualize where everything is at, and knowing if you're about halfway through the sprint, oh, there's still a lot of stuff over here that we haven't touched yet and inactive. How are we going to get that to testing and then to final approval so we can deploy it? So it's kind of a good visual.
Yeah, it's, you know, for folks on here, maybe I'll include this in the email as well, but we did a webinar maybe a couple months ago about how Kanban can improve Scrum. And I think, you know, there's an application for Kanban for lots of things, right? It's personal Kanban, it's Kanban for Scrum teams. And so we'll add a link in the email to that if people want to take a look at other ways that Kanban can help with Scrum. But I think that's a fantastic example of how it helped Monica, how it helped you make sense of what felt overwhelming and awful, and then how it helped the team just work better together.
Definitely. Yeah, Kanban showed, before Sid proposed this idea of work in progress and the Kanban board view versus list view, at daily scrums, I felt bad not knowing where to start. Or, team, I swear I'm working on stuff, but that wasn't relevant in our daily scrums, right? Because I had 40 or so backlog items assigned to me. So I couldn't obviously summarize all of those just in a daily scrum, right? And I'm not the only team member. So really having 5 to 7 PDIs assigned at once, being able to speak to those, and for me, seeing my progress. I was just really beating myself up because I wasn't seeing my own progress. And I think that inspired others to say, yeah, you know what, this is the work in progress that I feel comfortable with as well.
Yeah, it seems so simple, doesn't it? You know, in hindsight, but at the time, it's like, you know, it's not simple at all, and it feels like emotionally awful. And yeah, you feel like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we've all been there, but you kind of feel like a fake. Like, hey, I'm supposed to be good at this, and I'm not.
Kind of, yeah.
Right, and it really is just focus, right? Focus and limiting your work. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm not an idiot. I know how to do this, which is great. One of the questions that came up is, you know, well, if you're not in a room and you can't do this, you know, stickies on a wall, what do you do? So I'll let you guys kind of talk about how you do that too. But generally, we find Miro to be a fantastic tool for doing this at Applied Frameworks. So we use Miro for, you know, our internal work. We also build solutions. Miro, M-I-R-O, and I'll type it in the chat. I'll include a link to it in the email as well. The other thing that we're doing, we have a joint webinar we're doing with Miro in about, it's October 7th. So I'll include a link in the email to folks who want to see that. So we're going to be talking specifically about how a tool like Miro can make things like the daily scrum or the planning session more effective when you are like, hey, we're all sitting in our houses right now by ourselves, right? So how do we do some of these Scrum events more effectively? And so we'll be talking more about that, but I'm curious to hear from you guys. How do you handle that?
Yeah, our tool, we use Azure DevOps, and it does have the options for a board view. you kind of have to dig for it and work on it. But we developed, actually one of the other teams had it in progress. And so we kind of copied what they were doing. And the board is adjustable. And then you can, you know, as you pull things into your sprint, they're all kind of on already, you know, assigned to the far left column. And, you know, as we go through, we just drag them from column to column. So that works. And I know in our company, we don't have Mural, but we do have, we're a Microsoft company, or, you know, we use Microsoft products. Microsoft also has a whiteboard that you can download and use. And so it's very similar to Mural. And so folks could easily use that as well. And then you would just drag, you know, the virtual cards across. But the nice thing about Azure DevOps is that it was already included, you know, when you do your sprint planning, the cards, you know, the little items are already created for you.
And those of you on the phone, I came from TFS, so Team Foundation Services, and that it's very similar to ADO, Azure DevOps. So both of those platforms have this Kanban ability to have that visual. I'm not sure if this is vendor agnostic. Trello is another system out there that you guys can look up. That has been a wonderful tool that I've used in the past as well.
Yeah, we're definitely tool agnostic, and,
great.
We all have our favorites, but you know, all of us have to deal with what we actually have at our disposal and choices we get to make in the future. So yeah, we like to talk about the pros and cons of as much as we can.
Yeah, and it was MS Whiteboard. Yeah, that's what they call it, just Microsoft MS Whiteboard. Yeah. That's it.
Great.
We actually use that a lot for some of our retrospectives, because everybody can collaborate on it. So it's really good for that too.
Yeah, there's an image that we've used in the past for helping teams kind of reason about roles and responsibilities and alignment of what is happening inside a Scrum team. And so I'll take a note to include that in there as well. But that kind of background image you can upload into a lot of these tools to just, you know, have people put their little virtual stickies on top of, and just to kind of figure out, hey, are we all know what each other is doing in this team? And sometimes having a visual to help with that conversation, especially when you're remote, is a great thing.
Yeah, it does get tougher remote. Yeah, you have to be more creative. Yeah.
We're just about at our time. Jose asked about using Kanban for user stories and user story points. So the webinar that I'll give you a link to talks about Kanban in the concept of, or in the context of user stories. And I don't know if story points and things like that, I think those are two kind of separated but related topics, right? So certainly having a Kanban board in the like ready stage, like planning stage, you can tell where your stories are in their state of readiness by using Kanban. And Kurt Peterson in our other webinar talks about that. But you guys might find that, you know, you probably use it that way too, which is like, hey, this one isn't quite ready yet because we don't have enough information to bring it into estimation, right?
Right. Yeah. And in our Kanban board, we do have the ability to see how many story points have already been assigned to each user story. So everyone has a visual of how many quote unquote story points they have at one given time.
Yeah.
Great question. And yeah, something
so if there are any other questions, please put them into chat or the Q&A, because part of what we'll also do is things that we think deserve maybe a little bit more time or recommendations, or we didn't really get to answer the question as fully as we wanted to, we'll include those into the email that goes out as well. So we try to make the email that you get from us, you should open it. We try to make it useful. It's got a bunch of links and recommendations and the extra answers to questions. And so it's definitely a good one. Let's see, is there anything else that you guys want to say before we wrap up?
No, this was great. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thanks for everyone for your time today.
Yeah, I just want to say publicly for the 100th time, Monica, I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to say, hey, I was the one who was having a crisis, and I'm the one who needed some help. And Monica, I think it's just awesome that you kind of recognize that and just ask the question, right?
Oh,
so
thank you.
My takeaway from this is it's totally okay to suck as long as you mention it to somebody, because the reality is none of us do, right? We just need to sometimes have a little bit of help and a little bit of clarity from somebody else. And so all of us can probably ask for help once in a while, and everyone else can also offer it once in a while. And a couple of good frameworks, a couple of good conversations, bringing the team into kind of helping out. And, you know, you were almost going to get fired to, hey, things are a lot better.
Yeah, definitely much better now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll be sending the email out after this to everybody with links and things. And if anyone needs to contact me, my phone number and email address are on the last slide there. And if you have any questions for Sid or Monica, we'll definitely include those as well. And they will help me answer all of that. So thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Bye everybody.